Michimo, we're just getting set up. Let me know if you have any issues with the sound or the images so we can correct that. And we're going to put a link in the chat room. All right, so hold on one second. Okay, so Yachimo, greetings once again for joining in. We're going to start off where pick up where we left off last week. Just one additional thing we wanted to touch on before we move from the fictional character Muhammad. So if you look in the chat room, we have the link in the chat room. So in the context of talking about the fictional character Muhammad last week and showing Muhammad, and this is Muhammad, the waters move, Hatmet, the northern Nile, the spiritual force, the deity, Muhammad right here. And then of course this is Tahuti, and this is the heavenly Nile, the Hap-ur, the great Hap, the Nile, river of stars in the sky and so forth. And you see the moon. So we wanted to touch on this article we published a while back, note on Kura being the origin of the term Quran. And there's a cosmology associated with that we brought out that, of course, these white scholars are not going to bring out. And of course, they don't know the details. And then, of course, you have Black, quote unquote, scholars, whether they're quote unquote Afrocentric or not, who are unaware of the information, but some who are still trapped in the pseudo-linguistics of Europeans and using that model, even though they pretend they're blackening it up, but they're really not. They can't get to the proper definitions because they don't understand the cosmology, so they consistently publish things and teach things that are totally inaccurate. But as we prove here, you have to understand cosmology in order to understand the language. So the cosmology comes first. Deities manifesting creation first, and then they begin to, generate sound vibrations and so forth. The language comes after their manifestation. Now, we say in our publication, KUKUU-TUNTUM, later on in the book, when we're talking about the origin of the fake pseudo-holy books like the Bible, Quran, and Talmud, and, and so forth, and Torah, we say the Quran is not a holy book. It is not divinely inspired. The Quran is a series of perverted fragments from ancient writings of Kamit. That means perverted fragments. It's not texts of ancient Kamit with a few names changed around. If you have a text and then you take 99% of the text and throw it away, and then you have 1% of the text left, less than 1%, and then you pervert that, pervert the meanings, pervert the cosmology and so forth, and then you make that perverted fragment an entire quote unquote text and call it a holy book. That's not, Black people creating the Quran, which is pure stupidity, or creating Islam. That's idiotic. So they took perverted fragments from ancient writings of Kamit. The term ku or aku in the language of Kamit has been used for thousands and thousands of years in Kamit to describe illumination, wisdom, divine intelligence. The ancestral spirits are thus called Aku, meaning the illuminated or shining ones, those who have embraced or exude divine wisdom. The whites and their offspring use the title Ku-Ra, or divine wisdom of the Creator, and corrupted it into Quran. This is why they call the Quran the Book of Wisdom. Now, first we talk about the manner in which the whites and their offspring misinform and mislead our people. So for example, let's look at a different example. The term in ancient Khanitic Meht, due to the hieroglyphs, men means to abide, to remain, continue, be permanent, fixed, stable, and abiding. Amen is hidden, concealed, secret, and so forth. We thus have the great God, Amen, the male divinity, supreme being, is the hidden, great, hidden, permanent, and stable, abiding being. And Amenet is the great mother, supreme being, permanent, stable, fixed, abiding, hidden, the hidden, stable, permanent, fixed, abiding being. Amen and Amenet is the great father, the great mother, who work together, who comprise the supreme being, who are two halves of divine whole. There was never a time when there was just Amen. There was never a time when there was just Amenet. They have always been together from the beginning. Now, look at how the whites and their offspring lie about the origin of the term Amen. If you look at an etymological dictionary, they'll say Latin Amen, ecclesiastical Greek Amen, from the Hebrew Amen, meaning truth, used adverbially as an expression of agreement, as in Deuteronomy and Kings and so forth, meaning verily, surely, absolutely. From the Semitic root, amen, to be trustworthy, confirm, support. Now, that's from the Etym Online. And then you'll have from Wikipedia, the usage of amen, meaning so be it, is found in the early scriptures of the Bible, is said to be of Hebrew origin. However, the basic triconsonantal root from which the word was derived is common to a number of languages, such as Aramaic and the Semitic branch of the Afurasian languages. They'll call it a triconsonantal root, which of course it is not. The word was imported into the Greek of the early church from Judaism, from Greek Amen entered into the Western languages and so forth. Grammarians frequently list Aman under its three consonants, Aleph, Mem, and Nun, which are identical to those of Amen. And they talk about the Aleph sound, or the represents the glottal stop sound, functions as a consonant in the morphology of Hebrew. This triliteral root means to be firm, confirmed, reliable, faithful, have faith, believe. In Arabic, the word is derived from its triliteral common root of amanna, which has the same meanings of the Hebrew words and so forth. Then it says, popular among some theosophists, proponents of Afrocentric theories of history, and adherents of esoteric Christianity. Hold on one second. Is the conjecture that Amen is a derivative of the name of the Egyptian god Amun, sometimes spelled Amen. Some adherents of Eastern religions believe that Amen shares roots with the Hindu Sanskrit term Om. Such external etymologies are not included in standard etymological reference works. The Hebrew word, as noted above, starts with Aleph, while the Egyptian name begins with a Yod. Now, that's pure stupidity. It's an absolute lie. And then you have ignorant Negroes who think that they're linguists, will repeat that stupidity and say, well, Amen doesn't come from, in Hebrew doesn't come from Amen from Kamet, because, you know, it's a triconsonantal root in Semitic. Pure stupidity. The whites and offspring will continue to lie. When they say the triliteral root means to be firm, confirmed, reliable, faithful, and so forth. That's men, meaning stable, permanent, fixed, reliable. That's the nature of Amen and Amenet. This predates any Sanskrit, of course. It predates any so-called Aramaic. It predates any so-called Hebrew or any so-called Semitic languages. Amen and Amenet go back to the beginning. When you look at the earliest religious compositions, the pyramid text, you will find Amen and Amenet together in the cosmology. So, of course, we have the origin of the term in Amen, the nature of the divinity. And of course, you'll see in quote-unquote Hebrew or Arabic consonantal roots or triconsonantal roots. They didn't know what the vocalizations were because they stole the terms, stole the language and so forth, and claimed it for their own. So when these fools are running around talking about, well, that's not the same thing, because as you can see in Hebrew, it's a different definition, which is really not a different definition either, as we're going to see. Understand that people who still worship the whites and their offspring, no matter how Afrocentric they claim to be or African-centered, they still worship the whites and their offspring, and they will still embrace the foolishness. Now, when you don't have any facility with ancestral religion and actually dealing with these deities through authentic practice, then you'll embrace white foolish ideas and then try to blacken those foolish ideas up. But of course, as we show here, that's exposed as fraud. Now, Meht, the West, the abode of the dead land, and so forth. Land of the setting sun, land where the sun sinks below the ground and thus becomes Amen, hidden. When the sun sets, that is the end of the day. It brings things to a close. It is the greatest manifestation of finality in the world every single day. This is the association with Amen being said at the end of prayers. It is finality, completion, and is thus translated as so be it. These are descriptions of the meaning of the term. However, the whites and their offspring do not know why the three letters AMN come at the end of prayers, means so be it, mean firm, reliable. We have the word, we have the definition of the word, and also the why of the definition in our ancestral language and culture. It's always been part of the cosmology, as we say. So there are deities that undergird the word Amen, and Amenet, of course. And you'll find various terms with triconsonantal roots in, Arabic and Aramaic and so forth, that they have a general definition because they stole the term from our ancestral languages, but they don't know what the term means because there are actual deities who have the name which the term, manifests. Just as here with Amen. They just think it's a word. This is a male divinity as well as a female divinity. Now, the cosmology, as we say, provides the why. The cosmology is founded upon the direct interaction with the deities themselves. In a similar fashion, the whites and their offspring also lied about the origin of the term Karai. They lied about the origin. So when fools are once again repeating some etymological dictionary definition, they just assume, well, Massa wouldn't lie about this. He may have lied about other things, but surely he wouldn't lie about this. This is how brainwashed these Negroes are. Now, you look at Quran, it'll say from Karai, meaning to read, book reading, recitation. Now, we say brainwashed Negroes simply as swallow this and then run with it. Instead of asking, is this an outright lie? They just repeat what the whites and our offspring say. Now, let's show how misinformed these Negroes are. In the text called the Book of the Cow of Heaven, so-called Destruction of Mankind, the creator of the universe, Ra, tells the deity Tahuti, the divinity of divine wisdom, to come with him to the mountainous region. Ra then, and we talked about this in the whole Moses text and so forth, when Tahuti is, this where they stole the entire Mosaic pseudo history from and so forth, from this text. So Ra tells Tahuti, come with him to the mountainous region. Tahuti goes up into the mountainous region to connect with Ra, to communicate with Ra. Ra then takes on the form of the divine light called Aku, He is Ra Aku. He then makes the deity Tahuti his representative on earth, as we talked about in previous weeks and so forth. Tahuti is the divinity of divine wisdom, spokesperson of Ra. The light of the sun, Ra operating through the sun, is what illuminates the moon, and Tahuti is operating through the moon. Tahuti receives illumination from Ra, revelation from Ra. The moon receives the light or the illumination from Ra. This is why the moon can illuminate the earth in darkness. And when we're in darkness on earth, the moon and the divinity operating through the moon can illuminate our path and enlighten us, because it's receiving quote unquote revelation from the sun. Now, illumination, wisdom, enlightenment, illumination allows us to see, perceive when in darkness, which includes ignorance. Now, hold on a second. Now, when you're looking at the Quranic story, Tahuti, the divinity who goes up to communicate with the great God in the form of divine light, who brings him illumination and so forth, Tahuti, that divinity, is corrupted into the angel, the spirit angel, Jibril in the Quran, and Gabriel in the Bible. So they're flipping it around once again. In the Bible, when the quote unquote God sends Gabriel down to the two Marys, as we talked about earlier, Merit Shema, Merit Meht, Aset and Nebuchadnezzar, of course, where they stole it from, the two Marys at the resurrection of the fictional Jesus. Again, this is the episode from the Metternich Stele, the sorrows of Aset, where Aset and Nebuchadnezzar, the two Marys, Merit Shema and Merit Meht, when they take those roles, are lamenting the death of Heru, and Ra stops his boat of the sun and the sky to send Tahuti down to facilitate the resurrection of Heru. Tahuti is he from whom the whites manufactured Gabriel. They're constantly utilizing different deities, different aspects of the divinities to manufacture characters to put forward these little stories and then whiten them up. In the Quran, Jibril, the angel who comes down to bring the quote unquote enlightenment, illumination, wisdom to the fictional Muhammad, is Tahuti, coming from the presence of Ra, misnomered Ra. And in the KUKUU-TUNTUM, we talk about the title of Ra as Ra, meaning Ra, the great and Ra is corrupted by the whites and their offspring to Ura and Ula and Allah. The term as we've shown in our other book, Aqua Boson, is the meaning great for the masculine, Ura for the feminine, and so forth. Becomes Ul and El and all, and Northwest Semitic and so forth, and Illu and all of that. So Ra becomes Ura or Ullah, and later Allah and so forth. So Tahuti comes from the presence of Ra, misnomered Ra or Ullah, in the caves, mountains, to bring Ra's illumination, his Aku, his illumination, to the quote unquote prophet. So just like Jibril, quote unquote, is sent down to, bring the illumination of Allah to the prophet Muhammad, Tahuti comes from Ra, who takes the form of a divine light, Ra Aku, the illuminated one. He comes from the illuminated one. Now he's the moon, he's illuminated, and he brings that illumination to the quote unquote, to the divinity, which the whites and offspring corrupt into Muhammad. Now, this is why the book is falsely called the Book of Wisdom. It is the Aku Ra, the illumination of Ra and so forth. This is the corruption, the Qur'an or the Quran. Not that it has any illumination in it. This is where they stole the title from this aspect of cosmology. But the book is foolishness. Now, Tahuti, corrupted as Jibril, literally gives the fictional prophet the light, illumination, Aku of Ra. Now, we could go further regarding Muhammad, the waters, Mu of Hatmet, the northern Nile, operating through the river on earth and the river of stars in the skies, we said, called the Ha-Ur. You have this term Ur once again, meaning great, great one. And in fact, Let's just show that real quick just so you can see it. We do have it in the KUKUU-TUNTUM, but you just want to show it to you in the dictionary. Let me make sure you can see that. Okay, so for example, you'll see here Uru, which is plural, a group of gods who lightened the darkness. But you'll also see Ur, a great god. Ura, a great god. Ura, a great god. Then you have Uru, the great chiefs of heaven. So Ur is the singular, Uru is the plural, and so forth. And as you can see, there are numerous titles of divinities where Ur, Hekau, masculine, Urit, Hekau, the feminine, and so forth. Urt, or Urat, the high priestess. But it goes back to Ur, meaning great. And let me just pull that up. Ur, great, much superior, great, very greatness, great size. Then you have great man, great god, prince, chief, noble, eldest son, and senior, and so forth. Urat, great woman, great thing, great eldest. In Akan is Ura, and Awura is the female, and Owura is the male. So Owura is great, you know, honorific title, and Awura is a title for females in Akan. That's the same Ur or Ward in ancient Kamit, and Urat for the feminine. Now, and then it's given as titles, even the term Ura is a title of the priestess, one of the priestesses in Kamit, but or Hekau, a title of Set, because he's the great one of the Hekau, the divine words, ritual incantations, and so forth. Orit, Hekau, the name of the crown of the north or of its goddess, and so forth. Orit, Hekau. So feminine, that's also a title of Nebuchadnezzar, and so forth. So you'll see just a number of different divinities, Uru meaning great god, but you'll see a number of different divinities with the title Ur, but then you have the plural Uru, a group of gods who lighten the darkness. So Ur became, remember there's no letter L in ancient Kamit, there's a rolling R, so Ur became Ul, and Ura becomes Ulla, and eventually Illa. It's L in, you know, Kanana, L and Elat. Is from Ur and Urat, which is, you know, Ra and Ra'at and so forth. El and Elat becomes Al, Allah and Alat and so forth. Ilu and Ilut and so forth in Northwest Semitic. This is where that comes from. So just to get back to the text. Okay, so this is why you have Hop, or meaning Hop, the great Hop. You have the Hop, the river on earth. You have the river of blood in your body, as we talked about last week, but then you have the river of stars in the sky, the great, quote unquote, Milky Way, the great Hop, or the heavenly Nile. The light of the moon, we talked about Yah, Tahuti, Yah meaning moon and so forth, illuminates the heavenly Nile. The light of the moon illuminates the heavenly Nile. Tahuti illuminates Hapi. Tahuti illuminates Mu Hap Met. Jibril brings illumination to Muhammad in the sky. The Hap River is said to arise from the rocks, the caverns in southern Kamit, the Kerti, the two Ker caverns and so forth in the south, and we talked about that the previous week, but the river is released and so forth from the south between the caverns, the Kerti, the dual caverns and so forth, and that's where the river arises. This is why they say Muhammad went into a cave in the mountains to receive the revelation of Jibril. This is Tahuti, this lunar disk and crescent on his head, the divinity of divine wisdom. This is Hap, Hapi, quote unquote, Mu Hap Met, the spirit operating through the northern Nile and so forth. And this is Tahuti operating through the moon, receiving the illumination, the Aku from Ra, the Aku Ra. He receives the Qur'an or the Quran from, Ra and so forth. And then the full moon illuminates the heavenly Nile, Ya, Tahuti, and Hap-Ur, the moon and the heavenly Nile, the river, quote unquote, Jibril or Tahuti, illuminating Muhammad in the sky. All of this whites and offspring know, they simply lie about it because they know that many of our people still worship them and their pseudo methods of investigative inquiry, and will thus perpetuate misinformation under the guise of pseudo-linguistic theory. So all these fools calling themselves linguists, they don't know anything about this cosmology. Yet, many of them have traveled back and forth to Kamit, took people on study tours, and are still misinforming people on basic cosmology. Just traveling to a nation doesn't mean you understand the cosmology. You can travel to China every year and never understand the language or cosmology, even the false cosmology that they teach and so forth. Just traveling back and forth doesn't give you information, as we are proving here. So, Aku, the words of power, protective formulae, spells, the magical formulae of Tahuti, misnomer Thoth, and so forth, magical words, Aku, the magical formulae of Tahuti. These are the divine words, recitations from the spokesperson of the Creator to us. Remember, we talked about in the previous course, Ocheame in Akan means the spokesperson, the mouthpiece of the Ohini and Ohima, the king and queen mother. And Tahuti is the Ocheme, as shown in ancient Kamit. We have the same term in Kamit, meaning the spokesperson, the one who speaks the words and so forth, Ocheme, and that's Ocheame still in Akan, the same, same role and so forth. So as the spokesperson of Ra, the spokesperson of Aku, Ra, Aku, of course, he has the Aku, the divine formulae that bring wisdom and illumination. Aku, the magical formulae of Tahuti, protective formulae, spells, words of power, and so forth. Aku, light, splendor, radiance, brilliance, glorious deeds, splendid acts, virtues, excellences. Aku, beings of light, wise, instructive folk. Aku, the light god, great light, the sun, and so forth. The instructive folk are the illuminated ancestresses and ancestors. Now, their spirits and so forth. Note that the bird represented as the Akut bird is the crested habui, the crested ibis, the bird sacred to Tahuti. As we can see here, as well as the head of the bird here and so forth. Now we look at the book of the cow of heaven, so-called destruction of mankind from the tombs of Tutankhamen and Seti. And we talked about this with regard to the whole Moses piece, and how they stole, manufactured the Moses piece off of this text. But then there's even further corroboration that's still using this text to, corrupt more information. It said, and the majesty of this god Ra said, call to me the god Tahuti, and one brought the god to him forthwith. And the majesty of this god Ra said to Tahuti, let us depart to a distance from heaven from my place, because I will make light, and the god of light in the Duat and in the land of the caves. So they're going up into the caves. You shall write down the things which are in it. We talked about that before. And you shall punish those who are in it. That is to say, the workers who have worked iniquity or rebellion. Through you, I will keep away from the servants whom this heart of mine loathes. You shall be in my place. You shall be in my place, Asti, and you shall therefore be called Tahuti, the Asti of Ra. Moreover, I give you the power to send forth. Hab means to send forth, and thereupon came into being the Habui bird, the ibis bird of Tahuti. Moreover, I give you the power to lift up your hand before the two companies of the divinities who are greater than you. And what you do shall be fairer than the work of the divinity Ken. And therefore, the divine bird Tekni of Tahuti came into being, so forth. So we read about that before. But then he says, moreover, I give you the power to embrace the two heavens with your beauties and with your rays of light. Therefore shall come into being the moon god, or the moon orb, Yah of Tahuti. This is why he can be called Yah Tahuti. Tahuti operating through the Yah, the moon. So he just associated Tahuti with the moon. Moreover, I give you the power to drive back the Hadnebu. Therefore shall come into being the dog-headed ape, Anan. We talked about that previous weeks and so forth. Moreover, you are now in my place in the sight of all of those who see you and who present offerings to you, and every being shall ascribe praise unto you, O you who art the God. So he's putting Tahuti in his place as his representative. We talked about that in the quote-unquote Moses story, in the Quran. Now they're doing the same thing with the whole, when they start corrupting this portion with regard to Muhammad and so forth. But we talked about it with regard to the Torah. Now, whosoever shall recite the words, which is important, recite the words of this composition over himself, shall anoint himself with olive oil and with thick unguent, and he shall have propitiatory offerings on both of his hands of incense, and behind his two ears shall be pure natron, and sweet-smelling salve shall be on his lips. He shall be arrayed in a new double tunic, and his body shall be purified with the water of the Nile flood. So he's going to engage in ritual purification, Jita, with the Nile flood water specifically. And he shall have upon his feet a pair of sandals made of white leather, and a figure of the goddess Ma'at shall be drawn upon his tongue with green-colored ochre. So we're talking about ritual practices here. Whensoever Tahuti shall wish to recite this composition on behalf of Ra, he must perform a sevenfold purification for 3 days, and priests and ordinary men shall do likewise. These are instructions to us. Whosoever shall recite the above words shall perform the ceremonies which are to be performed when this book is being read. We're talking about recitation and then this book being read. And then they talk about how he shall make his place in the standing in a circle, which is beyond him, and his 2 eyes shall be fixed upon himself, and all his members shall be composed. If your eyes are fixed upon yourself, all your members are composed. You're engaged in ritual. That's a form of meditation and so forth, going back thousands of years. And his steps shall not carry him away from the place. Whosoever among men shall recite these words shall be like Ra on the day of his birth, and his possessions shall not become fewer, and his house shall never fall into decay, but shall endure for 1,000,000 eternities. And then it says, whosoever saith these words work his own protection by means of the words of power. I am the God Hekau, divine word of power. I am pure in my mouth, and in my belly I am Ra, from whom the gods proceeded. I am Ra, Aku, Ra the light god, and it says Ra, Aku, and you see the solar disk with the illumination. Now, Tahuti recites this composition on behalf of Ra. That's very important that the divinity of wisdom who receives the illumination is transmitting that illumination to the hot or the heavenly Nile. He recites this composition on behalf of Ra, as the text states above. In the Islamic myth, Jibril comes to Muhammad and recites the Qur'an, the illumination of Ra, the Quran, the revelation of the wisdom, Aku, of Allah, Ura. As the text states above, his body shall be purified with the water of the Nile flood, a reference to Muhammad receiving the purification, revelation in connection with divine wisdom recitations, Aku, Ra, Quran. Tahuti is instructed to write down what is in the spirit realm. This is the writing down of the Qur'an, or so-called Quran, after the revelation. You see the Arabs, when they were crafting their fake religion, breaking away from the, other forms of the fake religion, they're taking the same story and just tweaking it a little bit to make it slightly different than the quote-unquote Jewish and Christian and so forth. But it's the same misinformation. Now, what does Wikipedia say? The Quran, Arabic al-Quran, literally meaning the recitation, is a central religious text of Islam, which Muslims believe to be a revelation from God. It is widely regarded as the finest piece of literature in the Arabic language. Muslims believe the Quran was verbally revealed by God to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel, gradually over a period of approximately 23 years, beginning on December 22nd, which of course is the winter solstice, which is, dealing with, cosmology and astronomy and so forth. So God through, or Ra, through Jibril recited the Qur'an. Ra is Ra Aku, recited the Aku Ra to Tahuti. Tahuti is the moon. He illuminated Aku, the heavenly Nile, with the energy he received from the sun. Physically, when you look up in the sky, when you have the full moon in the darkness, it is receiving the light, the illumination from Ra, through the sun and so forth, Yaten, and then it illuminates the heavenly Nile, or Hak or Muhammad in the sky. Spiritually, Tahuti, the spokesperson of the creator and so forth, the Ocheame of the creator and so forth, receives the illumination, the messages, the divine wisdom, as well as the, directives for creation from the creator and so forth, and then transmits it to Muhammad and so forth, the illumination, the spirit operating through the northern Nile. They use the Nile, water of the Nile flood for the purification. And then, of course, December 22nd, the day after the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the illumination is given. The shortest day of the year, December 20th, 21st, but then after that, sunlight begins to increase about a minute or more per day. The birth of the sun at Christmas for the Christians is the revelation of the sun, the light, the illumination, the Qur'an, Akura. For the Muslims at the same time of the year, the solar energy of the light, the illumination is being born and beginning to grow right around December 22nd. Now, when we cease placing faith in the pseudo-linguistics of the whites and their offspring and actually go to the source, our cosmology, we find the real answers, proper etymologies rooted in the cosmological infrastructure which gave birth to the terms. So once again, that was just an addition to the information last week when we went into detail showing that Muhammad is a fictional cartoon character who never existed of any form or of any race, but we had to also show this aspect where the term Quran comes from, to expose the fraud of not only the whites and their offspring when they lie about the language, but these pseudo-Afrocentric, pseudo-Kemetic, pseudo-African-centered, quote-unquote, linguists who have no knowledge of cosmology and consistently misinform our community in their writings and teachings and debates and everything else. Now we're going to get to the fictional character Buddha. because there are a lot of Negroes who want to make the fictional cartoon character Buddha black and follow this fictional character because they're still enslaved, and they're writing books and having Black Buddhist organizations and talking about Buddha was a black man and a black revolutionary. Pure stupidity. That's no different than saying, you know, blackening up Santa Claus and then you have a whole cult following Santa Claus. Because deep down inside, people still want to identify with their slave master. They want to identify with whatever the whites and their offspring put forward. Whatever the master says, we're going to attach ourselves to it. We're not going to let it go. If we find out there's some misinformation, we'll just blacken up the white character so that we can continue to hug and hold the master. So that's all people are doing with Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Jainism, people following Mahavira, who's also a fictional character as well, and Negroes following Buddha and so forth. This is what's going on. So, but it's actually, not only is it idiotic, but it's also an insult to our ancestresses and ancestors, and of course our own Krawa, Kayet, but an insult to our ancestresses and ancestors and the actual deities from whom the crackers stole these fictional characters' titles from, and manufacturing false, you know, cosmologies and foolish stories based on corrupting fragments of our ancestral religion. So these fools want to embrace a false story and a fictional character and leave the original divinities alone. So that's self-hatred at the root. They will love to run to Asia because deep down inside, they hate themselves as Afuraitkaitnut people. No matter what they say, people can say things and talk about Africa all day and say, you know, everything comes from Africa, but at the end of the day, when they're running to Asia, trying to hold on to Asia, that's because they have a deep-seated self-hatred. They would like to run to Asia and trying to import Asia into Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, and blacken up the perverse Asian pseudo-culture and cosmology. Now, we say the whites and their offspring attempted to force Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut into the false belief that whites are capable of attaining divine enlightenment. They forced this false belief by manufacturing a fictional spiritual teacher and claimed that it had attained divine enlightenment. They also claimed that it had incarnated to teach the world the way to enlightenment or union with God and the end of all suffering. The whites and their offspring attempted to take Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, away from our actual means of attuning ourselves to the Supreme Being through the agency of the goddesses and gods and our ancestral spirits, and force us into accepting the false divinity represented by their fictional white character and the false teachings attached to it. This, they hope, would force Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, into the false belief that the whites are capable of spiritual perfection and that we should therefore accept them and follow their instruction. The fictional white character was called Buddha. Buddha never existed. The name Buddha is a name that the whites stole from the god Ptah. In the language of Kamit, the name Ptah means maker, fashioner, former. It means to open and so forth. The god Ptah is the spirit force in creation that gives form to the divine life energy of the great spirit Ra and Ra'at. And let's look at, for example, now here you have the god Ptah, the original, and then you have the corruption, the fictional character Buddha. Now, let's look at the pseudo etymology of the name Buddha, which some of these silly Negroes would like to embrace because they still want to hold on to this fictional character. All the cracker got to do is say this character existed, and Negroes leap onto it and hold on to it. They don't say, well, I'm not going to embrace this fictional character until you can prove conclusively that this character existed. I'm not going to embrace anything you have to say until you can prove to me this character existed. They don't take that approach. They just jump, leap, and embrace the fictional character and then say, I'm not going to let this fictional character go that white people gave me until somebody can prove to me that he don't exist. And until then, I'm going to hold on to this character. That's a slave mind. No matter if somebody's a scholar or teaching, you know, Tai Chi or Qigong or whatever it is, they're still enslaved. Now, you'll see in the Etymology Online dictionary, the epithet applied to the historical founder of Buddhism, fictional character actually, awakened, enlightened, past participle of Bud, to awake, know, perceive, which is related to the Sanskrit Budhati, is awake, observes, understands, the Proto-Indo-European root Bud, be aware, to make aware, title given to his adherents, and all of that. So that's what they're saying about the origin of the term, to make aware, awaken, and so forth. Let's look at the actual term. So once again, they take a term, a name, and apply it to a fictional character. They want you to worship them and stop communicating with your ancestresses and ancestors. So first they create statues of themselves. They have to give that statue a name. So they take a name from our language, and then they have to give a human history to this fictional character. And then they have to apply some, you know, philosophy to this character. So they take fragments from what was part of our culture, stick it in, but then they twist it to make us, you know, follow them. That's how they manufacture these characters. Now, you can see there's another site in Theravada Buddhism, the dominant school of Southeast Asia. It is thought there is only one Buddha per age of humankind. Each age is unimaginably a long time. The Buddha of the current age is our historical Buddha, Siddhartha, Gautama, and so forth. This is what they're talking about. But let's look at, first we're going to look at a definition of the actual, you know, deity. So we showed the Divinity Ptah. And when you look at the name Ptah, so you'll see Ptah, the architect of heaven and earth, the master craftsman in working metals, sculptor, designer, and the fashioner of the bodies of men. He was the blacksmith, sculptor, and mason of the divinities. He has a number of different forms. But you'll see Ptah meaning to ask, to pray, a prayer, which is ritual invocation, but also to open, to make open. It can also mean work to engrave, but to open, to make open, to open up. Ptah, to open up. And then in Arkan is Ptah becomes Boda and Boda. Now Boadier is the divinity, the craftsman, the fashioner, and so forth. But Boadier or Boada or Porta, Ptah, the divinity, the one who opens up to make something open, to open it up. That means to, if you open something up, that's where this whole notion of awareness comes from. When you open up your eyes, you make things aware. And you're going to, as we get into the cosmology of Fattah, you'll see why. But but it also means to ask, to pray, or prayer. So that's ritual invocation, and then also opening, to make open so that awareness can happen. As you can see what is real, what is true, what is genuine, and so forth. This is what the origin of the name is, but this is a divinity. Now let's switch back over to so cosmologically, what is Ptah doing? We're going to get into the Shibata text and so forth. So Ptah, we say Ptah is the spirit force in creation that gives form to the divine life energy of the great spirit, Ra-Ra'et. Ptah took the energy of the great spirit and fashioned it into the various spiritual and physical forms of plants, animals, minerals, humans, planets, stars, nature spirits, goddesses, and gods. Ptah is the spirit force in creation operating through the innermost core of all stars, the innermost core of the sun, the innermost core of the earth. In your body, Ptah operates through your brain, the inner core that fashions thoughts and ideas and formulations. He's the divine fashioner at the inner core of earth. In your spirit, Ptah is the force that takes the spiritual power moving through you and fashions it into a form that you can use to execute your function in the world. Just as the brain formulates the functions and the actions, the movements of the entire body, so does Ptah formulate the function, the action, the movement of the spiritual power moving through you. While Ra and Ra'et, the great spirit, is the divine living energy moving within you, giving you life. And Heru is the force that regulates the flow of this spiritual energy. We talk about Heru sitting in the heart, regulating the flow of energy to every, through its palpitations to every cell in the body and so forth. Ptah is the force that fashions the spiritual energy into specific forms, matrices, which carry the power to accomplish your specific objectives. Ptah is the force that takes the energy moving through you and forms it into muscular energy so that you can walk around and move. Ptah is the force that takes the energy moving through you and forms it into digestive energy so that you can digest your food and be nourished by it. Ptah takes the energy moving through you and forms it into mental energy so that you can study, listen, understand, and communicate. Ptah is the force within you that takes the energy moving through you and forms it into sexual energy so that you can procreate with your spouse and bring life into the world again. Ptah's functioning in your spirit and body are a reflection of his functioning in creation. He is the spirit force in creation, formulating the functions, the actions, the movements of the divine living life energy, moving through all created things in creation. Ptah takes the divine life energy of the great spirit, Ra-Ra'et, which moves through all created things and shapes it into forms that your organs, structures, cells, your spirit can use. He shapes the divine life energy of Ra-Ra'et into forms that the planets and stars can use. He operates through the innermost core of all created things. He shapes and we say created things, naturally created things, not the whites in our offspring. He shapes the divine life energy of Ra-Ra'et into forms capable of executing the order of Amen, Amenet. As Ptah functions in creation, he shows us how to function in creation. Now let's add one other piece to that. So in our book, Ptah Sasatem, this is our curriculum, educational curriculum and so forth. We say Ptah is the name of the spirit force in creation operating through the innermost core of the sun, innermost core of earth. So that is the workshop of Ptah. When you see him in the workshop, he's the master craftsman and sculptor. That energy within the core of earth churning, and that the thermodynamics turning from the core of earth determine the shape and form of the earth and so forth. Deep within you, in your brain and so forth, constantly shaping and fashioning thought forms and energetic forms and so forth. Now, he's at the core of planets, suns, moons, stars, center of resonance within the brain and spiritual anatomy. He's shown in Kamit and Kamit, Egypt and Nubia, standing upon a symbol which represents Ma'at Ma'at, divine law and balance. And you will see Ptah sitting on his throne. You see 3 ears behind him, or 4 ears behind him. And the reason for that is you'll see he is the one who hears the directives of Amenet and Amen and fashions the universe accordingly. He also hears our invocations, our prayers, Ptah, and fashions thought forms, images, ideas in accordance with divine order so that we have access to well-structured, divinely ordered thoughts and intentions, which will ultimately birth well-balanced behaviors. So he can hear, you see him sitting here, he's mummified in a form of susu, which is meditation, and then he can hear from Amen and Amenet and take the energy, the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'at, and fashion proper thought forms, forms of creation, including thought forms, and those proper thought forms that are divinely ordered lead to well-structured, divinely ordered behavioral forms, and that transforms our behavior. So through that meditative posture, he receives that illumination because he can hear the two ears. He receives the divine commandments, directives, illumination, and so forth, and then fashions forms accordingly. You know, Buddhism is talking about, you know, Buddha receiving or achieving, quote unquote, enlightenment, and then he has the capacity to, you know, teach others, teach the world, a release from suffering and so forth, the quote unquote middle path and all of that, and how to form, you know, behaviors in a harmonious way and transform your thoughts and not be controlled by lust and all these different things. That comes from Ptah fashioning thought forms, behavioral forms, because he can hear from the divine and transmit that to every aspect of creation. This is where they stole that from. Now, of course, in Buddhism, it's nothing but lies because they try to dissuade you from embracing the deities. They say, well, the deities, you don't need the deities for enlightenment, quote unquote. They don't even know what enlightenment is. But they'll say you don't need the deities for enlightenment. In fact, they're going through their own, you know, development, and they haven't fully developed themselves. So if you follow them, you're going down a wrong path, and you don't need to communicate with the ancestral spirits. The crackers are always trying to keep us from invoking the deities and evoking our ancestresses and ancestors, because when we are kept away from that, then we won't be attuned to the forces in nature that govern creation in order, and we won't seek to operate intelligently, which means to seek the extermination of the whites and their offspring. So if they can keep us away from attuning to using those ears of Ptah to hear from the divinities and our ancestral spirits, they can keep us from that. They can keep us under control. Just like in the West, they can keep us believing in Jesus and Muhammad and Moses and Abraham and Yahweh and all that foolishness, then we would never seek up, if we were on the plantation, to rise up and kill the slave master, kill his wife, kill his children, kill his staff, burn it down, and free ourselves. We would never do that if we're listening to our own ancestresses and ancestors, listening to our own Ka, listening to the Abosom, the forces of nature, who will always direct us to exterminate our enemies. So if we don't listen to that, and we only listen to them, then they can always control us. This is the message of the fictional character Buddha. If you don't listen to the ancestresses and ancestors and the deities, then you follow this fictional character and this foolish philosophy associated with this character, and you will always be a docile slave to these white Asians. That was the purpose of Buddhism, and that's what it still is, trying to enslave the population of the Black people whose culture that they invaded. Remember, of course, the Aryans invaded India. They invaded all Southeast Asia and so forth, but they invaded India. And then when they talk about Buddhism coming out of Hinduism and, you know, going into India and so forth, they were trying to control the population of the Black people, the Afuraitkaitnut people, from overthrowing the white Aryans and other Asians and so forth. So in order to control the population, they have to give you some little fictional homosexual, dissexual type character who's telling you, don't attack the enemy, stay balanced in middle path, and seek escape from the cycle of reincarnation. And all you want to do is be liberated. You don't want to reincarnate. You don't want to reincarnate into this world of quote unquote illusion and so forth. The goal of, you know, spiritual development is to escape the cycle of reincarnation that is pure stupidity. We don't escape the cycle of reincarnation. We don't seek to escape it. The whites and our offspring seek to escape that, and they don't escape it either. But this world is a prison as far as they're concerned, with their white perverse skin, living on earth and so forth. They are parasitic cells, parasitic entities. The sun kills them, they're not at home on Earth. They're not at home in their melanin recessive body. Earth is sacred to us. So us returning to Earth through the cycle of Bebra, or reincarnation, that's a privilege, that's divine, that's sacred. We look forward to that. They're trying to escape that. Talking about the flesh is sinful, the flesh is weak, you try to overcome the desires of the flesh and so forth, and you want to control the flesh because it will lead you in a negative path. Their flesh is sinful, their flesh is weak, their flesh is inferior and perverse. Ours is divine. The melanin dominant flesh of the Afurakanu man and Afuraitkaitnut woman is sacred and divine. So we don't have the same perverse pseudo philosophy as our enemies. So this is why Buddhism was created, to enslave the minds of the Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut population in the area where they were pushing this fake religion and fictional cartoon character. This is what the slave Negroes who still embrace a Black Buddha and are promoting that idiocy are pushing, but deep down inside, they hate themselves and they still want to identify, and most of them lay up with non-Black women or men and so forth. They're looking for some escape and excuse to embrace our enemies. Now, as Ptah functions in creation, the great fashioner of forms that the divine living energy will operate through, as he functions in creation, he shows us how to function, act, move through creation, because he is the force fashioning the life force energy of humans, plants, animals, minerals, into forms capable of executing the divine order. Ptah has the title Neb Ankh. In the language of Kamit, Neb means master, Ankh means life. Ptah Neb Ankh means Ptah, the master of life, or the life master. And let's look at that real quick. So if you look in the hieroglyphic dictionary and so forth, Ptah Neb Ankh. Neb means master. They'll say Lord. You know, sometimes they'll translate it as Lord, typically master, but we know what it is. Ptah Neb Ankh, the master Neb of life, or the life master. Now to go back to the other text. So the title Ptah Neb Ankh, master of life, a life master, as the spirit force in creation who takes the divine living energy, or life energy of the great spirit, Ra and Ra'at. Imagine solar energy flooding the earth to empower and vitalize the earth and so forth, and you take a portion of that energy and fashion it into a sphere that takes up residence in the form of an organ so it can execute a certain function in the body. This is Ptah taking the divine living energy and fashioning it into specific forms: heart, liver, spleen, lungs, pancreas and so forth. And these potent geometric forms carry certain configurations of energy that have certain forms in the body. There are spiritual organs that become dense into physical organs that have different roles in the body. Ptah takes that divine living energy and fashions it into specific forms. Similar to if you have a machine that takes electromagnetic energy, and that machine happens to be a quote unquote laser, we'll take that energy and fashion into a specific form, and now a laser beam comes out and it can be used specifically to remove cataracts from the eyes of individuals. They're taking energy, taking it through a process and channeling it into a specific form so it can execute a specific objective. First, it was just solar energy, but they took that energy and concentrated it through a process into a specific form to execute a certain function. Ptah takes the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'at, fashions it into specific forms, potent matrices of energy, so it can be used to execute specific functions coming from the directives of Amen and Amenet. Now, so he takes the divine life energy of the great spirit, Ra and Ra'at, and shapes it and fashions it into various life forms in creation. First, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, human life, then the organs within our bodies and our cells, the specific forms that each one takes, He's the one who fashions all of that. Because he does that and he fashions the various life forms in creation, he is the master of life, the life forms. He fashions them, makes them real, and so forth. He's the master of life. For thousands and thousands of years, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut have communicated with the god Ptah, invoked the spirit under the title Ptah Nebang, the master of life. And the whites and their offspring corrupted the name Ptah into Ptah and Buddha. They took the title Nebang, or master of life, or life master, and applied it to the fictional white character. Ptah Nebang, or Ptah the life master, was corrupted into Buddha, the life master, or Buddha the sage, sage meaning life master. So he's the one who mastered life, achieved illumination, ascension, and so forth. And then he can go and teach everyone else in the world. As they say in the Theravada sect, there's only one Buddha for a specific time that brings the entire world, the quote unquote teaching. You have Ptah. He is the one who takes the divine life energy, the illumination of Ra and Ra'at, fashions it into forms for every life entity in creation. So, the master of life. This is the cosmology where that comes from where that comes from. Now, sage is a corruption of the term seisha, which means learned one or skilled one or wise one in the language of Kamit. Seisha was another title of Ptah, so let's look at that term as well. And this, of course, is another term that Negroes who are worshiping this fictional character Buddha, trying to blacken this fictional character up, they don't have that information. Let me pull this up real quick. Of course, if you have any questions, post them in the chat room. Okay. So as we said here, Sesha, the learned one, Seshua, able, wise, a wise man, skillful, cunning, and so forth. So that title, Sesha, meaning wise one, learned one, skilled one, and so forth. You have the term sage, wise one, master, associated with, the fictional character Buddha. This is where they get these terms from, where they steal these terms from. Hoping that we would never figure that out. Now, so that's the Seisha piece we talk about in the KUKUU-TUNTUM, another title of Ptah. The whites simply as the knowledgeable one, the skilled one, he's the master craftsman and so forth. The whites took the knowledge of the god Ptah, the divine spirit force operating through the innermost core of the sun, the earth, your brain, and the formative power of your spirit, and applied it to their fictional white male character. For thousands and thousands of years, the temples in Kamit have included the statement Nukpanuk. So you'll see, I am this, I am so-and-so. Anuk, I am, pon means this, and anuk, I. So when it says Nukpanuk, I exist, I am, anuk, pon, this, anuk, I am, and so forth. So when it says Nukpanuk in the language of Kamit, I exist as I am, pon means this, that, who, or what, Nukpanuk thus means I am who I am that I am, I exist as that which I am. This statement of identity, nuk or anuk panu, I exist as that which I am, focuses Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut on the fact that we exist as who we are, as defined by the Supreme Being. We are to be who we are, not attempt to imitate anything other than who we are. We have a specific function executing creation, just like every organ in the body has its own function, its own form, its own identity. Now, because we are created by the Supreme Being to execute a specific function in creation, to exist and act according to who we truly are, is to participate in divine order, to embrace the reality of Nuk Pon Nuk, is to function properly in the world. This statement you'll find in, temples and, in association with various deities in the Runu, Pertnim, Heru, and so forth throughout that. Find it in number of places, which is just, common. It's, repeated through speech and chant and song, various prayers, just a common, common statement. The whites and their offspring corrupted this realization of Nupanu into Nupanu, Nibanu. You also have in, certain dialects, Nibanu and Nibana, and other dialects, Nurpanu and Nirvana, and so forth, Nirvana by the whites. So Nirvana, meaning like not moving and so forth. This has to do with this notion of Nuk Panuk, I am this, I am, or I am that, I am, and so forth. And then after that statement, you'll find whatever divinity or attribute that they are talking about or what they are associating it with. But it is Ptah who makes you who you are. You get divine living energy from Ra and Ra'at. You come into being as a living entity, but the specific form that distinguishes you from somebody else, because they have their own form, it is Ptah who fashions your form. It is Ptah who makes you who you are. It's Ptah who distinguishes you form-wise from another entity. It is through Ptah that you can say, Anuk, Panuk, I am this, I am, Nupanu, or Nibbana, Nirvana, and so forth. But it really goes back to Nupanu, I am that, this, I am who I am, and so forth. Now, so that's what we're saying in this section. Ptah fashions our physical bodies, our spirit bodies, our thought forms into forms that differ from one another. Ptah upholds the divine order of Amen, Amenet, as he fashions the forms of all created things in creation. It is therefore through Ptah that we can embrace the realization of who we are. It is through the forms within which we exist that we can understand and realize we are who we are. Whether it's plant life, animal life, mineral life, there's many different animals, many different plants, many different minerals, and then many different kinds of Afuraitkaitnut human beings with different energy complexes. We are unique according to that. Now, so that's what we're saying in that particular section. But they said it is through Buddha that we can embrace the reality of Nibbana, Nirvana, Nirpana, Nipanu, Nupanuk, and so forth, to find out your true spiritual identity and escape the cycle of reincarnation through the direction or under the direction of Buddha or Ptah. You can find out who you truly are, who the self really is, and merge with it and all of that. But as we can see cosmologically, if you know who Ra and Ra'at are, the creator and creatress, the divine living energy, and then what Ptah does with that divine living energy, fashioning it, portions of that energy into specific forms that differ from one another according to divine order that's transmitted ultimately from Amen and Amenet, the great Father and great Mother Supreme Being. You see his role in relation to Ra and Ra'at, in relation to Amen and Amenet, and so forth. And you know why he's the one who makes you who you are, Nupanu, and so forth. They're not going to give you all of that in Buddhism. They're just going to say, well, Buddha attained enlightenment, and you follow his direction and you can, find out who you are as well. Nonsense. The whites taught that their fictional character Buddha was born of a virgin named Maya, or the great Maya. This is another perversion of the birth of Heru by the virgin Aset Merit. Maya, the name applied to the fictional virgin mother of Buddha, is a version of Maria, a Mari, a Mary, a Merit, and so forth, Meia, and so forth. The fictional character Buddha was also made to be the son of the king, which is another perversion of the story of Heru. Heru is the son of the king Alsar and Queen Alset. The fictional wife and son of Buddha is stolen from the knowledge of the gods and goddesses, where the god Ptah has a wife, Sekhmet, And the sun is the god Nefertem. That's the triad and the Nefer and so forth, Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertem. And just so you can see that. So you can see the wife and son of Buddha and so forth, where they stole it from. And then when you see them, so this is just a papyrus, Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertem. When you see them, then you have to look into what is the cosmology associated with Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertem. And here's another representation of Ptah and Sekhmet, you know, husband and wife and so forth. Then you have to go into the whole cosmology of Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertem and what their roles are. Is Buddhism giving you that? Are these Negroes practicing some pseudo, you know, Black Buddhism, giving you that information? Who is Sekhmet in relation to Ptah? Who is the son Nefertem in relation to Ptah, the corruption of, you know, corrupted into Buddha and so forth? They don't know any of that. They're just following some Asian nonsense because they worship Asians under the cover of Afrocentrism and pseudo scholarship. Now, then we talk about the whole notion of the Hot Ptah Ka and so forth, the house of the Ka Ptah, sacred sanctuary of the Nefer and so forth, related to Afurakanu and so forth. And let's get to that information. Here's another depiction of Ptah. Ptah, Nefer, hair, Ptah, the excellent or beautiful or radiant of hair, face. Nefer means beautiful, radiant, excellent. This is Pth, Ptah, the seated divinity. And then hair means face, but also head. Even the English term head comes from hair, and Kamit, hair, or head, heady, and the seated divinity and so forth. Here's Ptah, the Nefer, head or beautiful of face, or radiant or illumined of face, head. This form of Ptah with the sun disk on his head is the origin of Buddha, the enlightened or illumined one. Mummified in that form of mummification or meditation and so forth. And then the illumination, the solar disk comes upon the head. Ptah, Buddha, becomes enlightened or illuminated, or the illuminated one and so forth. This is where they stole that from. So anybody talking about quote unquote Buddhism or Black Buddhism and Ashoka and all of that, and even the whites in our offspring will even admit they can't find any evidence of Buddha ever existing. Of course, he didn't. So, but if anybody's talking about Buddhism and Buddhism being Black and all that nonsense, and I'm not talking about Ptah, that's because they don't know what they're talking about. Now, let's look into some of the cosmology. And in fact, we can show this quickly. What they call the Dharma Chakra. You know, of course, we wrote our book, you know, on the origin of the term yoga, kara, kasa, the origin and nature of the chakra. So chakra, kakra comes from kara in ancient Kamit, talking about that cylinder or wheel and so forth. But we go into detail about where they stole that from. They'll talk about the Dharma Chakra as the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of truth and all this nonsense, the wheel of the law. So you'll see these images, and you'll also see this image here as the wheel of truth and associated with Buddhism and all of that. So we get some real information out here. You find the Adinkra symbols in Akan tradition. The symbol for the Sunsum, the spirit body, is this symbol. The symbol for the Akra, the cross symbol, the soul, divine consciousness. And then you have that unified symbol of the Sunsum and the Akra. You have the Ohini Eniwa, the eyes Eniwa of the Ohini, the king, are all around. In Akan, we say Ohini Ye Oriya, the king is the sun. So the right eye of Ra is the sun and so forth. So the eyes of the king, the eye and so forth can see all around the entire circumference of the nation, but also of creation, the all-seeing eyes. Every aspect of creation, you can see the eyes in Niwa of the Ohini, the king. Can see all things, can attune to all things, just like Ra and Rod and so forth, the king and queen, mother and so forth, the illuminated ones and so forth. This is this sacred symbol, the union of the spirit, the Sunsum and the Okra, the soul and so forth, and the capacity for the one who balances the spirit and the soul, the Sunsum and the Okra, Okrawa, to be illuminated and see or attune to or have insight or inner vision or inner illumination, attuned to the Supreme Being to make proper decisions. This is an ancient symbol associated with the Ohini, the king, who is the sun and so forth. And of course, we show this cosmogram. We show different variations. Here's another variation, the union of the Sunsum symbol, the circle with the four smaller circles, and then the cross symbol together in one. And you also have it here. Ancient Akan symbolism. We show the Newt symbol from ancient Kamit. So in our Hoodoo class, we show that whole cosmogram and what it means, and we go into detail about that in our Hoodoo class part 4, the Akan cosmogram. This is another variation with the eye of the king and so forth. But we go into detail about that. We just want to show that what they call that Dharma Chakra, the eyes of the king that can see all around, the omniscience, the illuminated one who can see all things and is attuned to divine wisdom and so forth. That's thousands of years old, has nothing to do with any Buddhism or Hinduism or any of that nonsense. And since the king is the sun, when we go back up, just want to show a quick representation here. Typically, you see the solar disk, says the sun god Ra, and so forth, day, period, time. You see the circle with the dot in the middle, sometimes just the circle itself, the circle with the dot in the middle. Sometimes you see the circle surmounted by a serpent and so forth. When we're talking about the king of the sun, Ohini Ye Oriya, the king is the sun, and then the Ohini Eniwa, the eyes of the king and so forth, the sun in the different, positions. Of course, you're going to find a variation of that solar disk with the different eyes around the sun and so forth, to shine, rise, but then shine and lighten and so forth. That is that same quote unquote Dharma Chakra, that wheel of illumination and so forth. It comes from that, and of course in our Khan tradition, we maintain that, as we just showed. Buddhism, Hinduism, that comes thousands of years later. Okay, so somebody was saying they couldn't see the images. Were you able to see this one here? Let me know if you can see that one, this symbol. And as we mentioned before, like Zoom was letting people know that because of all of the people on Zoom, because of the quarantine, sometimes the images take time to pop up. For a while, things were kind of working okay. I noticed today that even the image, as far as my image, is a little not as clear, so they might be having problems again. But when you watch the recording, it usually pops up without any issue. But let me know in the chat room if you're able to see the images now. Okay. Okay, so it must be, Zoom might be having that problem again. So when you watch the recording of the broadcast, you're going to see that all of the images show up. I'll put a link in the chat room for this. For this particular link we're looking at now. But if you, when you're looking in the KUKUU-TUNTUM, when we were talking about, Ptah, Nefer Hair and so forth, and the image of him, that's all in the KUKUU-TUNTUM book. So you'll see that image there. And we were just showing, as you see in the recording, you're going to see that image of the cosmogram and Akan culture. But this is what we're looking at right now. If you go to the link we just posted in the chat room, this is what's on the screen now. So if you can't see the screen, just that Sophia Topia link, that's what we're putting up now. Okay, and the reason we're posting this, so the Shibata Stone is well known because it lays out Min-Nefer cosmology. Shibata, Per-A, so-called Pharaoh, Shibata, Ainsu, sovereign, found this stone, realized it was in work of the ancestresses and ancestors. This is during the quote unquote, around the 26th dynasty or whatever, of Kamit, and found this stone with, he found a text with ancient writing on it, cosmology, and he decided to copy that ancient text that he found on a stone. And this is what they call the Shibata Stone, because thousands of years later, when the whites and offspring are invading, Egyptologists, in quote unquote Egypt and so forth, in the previous century, they find this stone and has this text that Shibata directed the people to copy onto this stone. He found a text that was, in fact, this is what he says on the stone in the beginning. First, they give his titles: the living Heru, excellent of the two lands, the Nepti, the golden Heru, king of Upper Lower Kemet, Nefer Kara, the son of Ra Shabaka, beloved of Ptah, south of his wall, who lives like Ra forever. This is, like over 2,600 years ago. This writing was copied anew by His Majesty in the house of his father Ptah, south of his wall, for His Majesty found it to be a work of the ancestresses and ancestors, which was worm-eaten, so that it could not be understood from beginning to end. His Majesty copied it anew so that it became better than it had been before, in order that his name might endure and his monument last in the house of his father Ptah, south of his wall, throughout eternity, as a work done by the son of Ra Shabaka for his father Ptah Tanin, so that he might live forever. So he's telling us that he came across this text that was worm-eaten. It was a text of an ancient text of the ancestresses and ancestors. So the king, Shabaka, looking at the work, honoring his ancestresses and ancestors, says, since this text was found, it was worm-eaten, we're going to copy this on a stone and it's going to live forever. And 2,600 years later, we're still reading, from that stone, because he was astute enough and had the presence of mind and spirit to copy this ancient ancestral text down. So we're reading this text from him as this great ancestor, and he was relaying to us an earlier text from ancient ancestresses and ancestors of his own, which are ours as well. So it's talking about the cosmology of Fattah. Now, in the beginning, they're talking about some other things. They're talking about, you know, what happened with Heru and Set, and how Heru was adjudged to be the proper heir to the throne, and he was given, you know, upper and lower Kamit, and all these different things. So they're talking about what Geb had to say about that, and they're going back and forth. So that's the first part of the text. But we just want to get simply to the part talking about the role of Ptah. You know, his function in creation. So it says there comes into being the heart. In the heart, there comes into being by the tongue as the image of Atem. Ptah is the very great who gives life to all of the deities and their kas and kayats, their souls, through his heart and this tongue. Heru came into being in him. Tuhuti came into being in him as Ptah. Power came into being in the heart and by the tongue and in all limbs, in accordance with the teaching that it, the heart, is in all bodies, and it, the tongue, is in every mouth of all divinities, all men, all flocks, all creeping things, and whatever lives, thinking whatever the heart wishes, and commanding whatever the tongue wishes. So what's generated in the heart, and we've talked about, you know, biologically, they discovered a brain within the heart, just like there's a brain in the gut brain, and then the heart brain, and then, you know, the brain and, you know, the regular brain and so forth. That's, according to science, that's a new discovery, but we've always talked about that intelligence within, or wisdom within the heart. So and we've talked about this in previous classes, so you can look up the quote unquote brain in the heart to see what we're talking about physiologically. But they're talking about what's generated within the heart is spoken through the tongue and so forth. So this is what they're talking about. And Heru came into being within Ptah as the heart, and Tahuti operating through the tongue as a spokesperson. So it says, his Ptah's Ennead, or company of the divinities, is before him as heart, authoritative utterance, teeth, seminal fluid, lips and hands of Atem, and the seminal fluid carries the sperm cell, and the energy animating the sperm cell is connects with the ovum, and the energy animating the ovum, we talked about Neat, the female goddess Neat, governing the energy that animates the ovum, and the divinity Kunwimu or Kunum, the potter divinity, animating the energy within the seminal fluid. And when Kunum and Neat, the male divinity Kunum and the female divinity Neat, operate as the energy within the seminal fluid and the energy within the blood that carries the ovum, those two deities unite, fuse their energy so that we can have, you know, a child and so forth. So that's what they're talking about here. But the Ennead of Atem came into being through his seminal fluid and through his fingers. That's talking about when Atem united his sexual organ with Atemet, the female divinity, Asase Nebedetepet, and they fused together to give birth to Shu and Tefnut and so forth. That's alluding to that. And this is why it says, surely this Ennead, this company of the divinities of Ptah, is the teeth and lips and the mouth, proclaiming the names of all things, from which Shu and Tefnut came forth from as him, and which gave birth to the Ennead of Ptah. The key is what they're saying: the sight of the eyes, the hearing of the ears, the breathing of the air through the nose, they transmit to the heart, which brings forth every decision. Indeed, the tongue thence repeats what is in front of the heart. Thus was given birth to all of the deities. Ptah's company of the deities Ennead was complete. Every word of the deity came into being through the thoughts in the heart and the command by the tongue. So they're talking about what's generated in the heart, spoken by the tongue, comes into being. And Ptah, he's the one that receives that information from Amen and Amenet. He received the directives from Amen and Amenet. He receives the energy from Ra and Ra'et, and within his heart, he receives that, he channels it, and then it's spoken through the tongue, and then he fashions all forms according to what was in his heart and spoken through the tongue. What was placed in his heart, because he heard, remember the ears from Amen and Amenet, the Supreme Being. He receives their directives. He captures that in the heart. He speaks it, and then he fashions according to divine order. And we should do the same thing. We should hear from Amen and Amenet, the Great Mother, Great Father, Supreme Being. It's captured within our heart and so forth. And then we speak into existence and then engage in behaviors that's reflective of what we heard from them and captured in our heart and hold in our heart. So, now, it says, thus all witnessing faculties were made and all qualities determined, that they make all foods and all provisions through this word. Justice is done to him who does what is loved, and punishment to him who does what is hated. This is divine. Justice to what is done, to what is loved, and punishment to him who does what is hated. Some things are divinely hated. The deities are talking about what is hated and what is loved. That's divine love and divine hate, as we've written in our book, Marenechi, Divine Love, Law, and Divine Hate. Now, thus life is given to the peaceful, and death is given to the criminal. The deities say we kill the criminal. We don't embrace the criminal. We do not, turn the other cheek with the criminal. The deities are saying life is given to the peaceful and death is given to the criminal. We kill our enemies. That's the divine response to our enemies. We don't pray for them, we kill them. Now, thus were made all labor, all crafts, the action of the arms, the motion of the legs, the movements of all the limbs, according to this word, which is devised by the heart and comes forth by the tongue and creates the performance of everything. Then they say, thus came the saying that Atem, who created the divinities, said concerning Ptah, he gave birth to the deities. From him, everything came forth, foods, provisions, divine offerings, all good things. Thus Tahuti, the divine wisdom, understood and recorded that he is the mightiest of the divinities. Thus Ptah was satisfied after he had made all things in divine words. He's the fashioner of everything. The life comes, imagine solar energy coming into the earth, enlivening the earth, but then Ptah, and deep within the core, takes that solar energy and fashions mountains, fashions riverbeds, fashions savannas, fashions deserts, fashions all terrain and so forth, and the seeds and everything that grew up within the earth and so forth. And when they grow up, he fashions plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afuraitkaitnut, human life, fashions our organs and everything else. He receives the divine living energy and fashions that within his workshop, deep within the core. He's mummified deep within the core in his pavilion and so forth, and fashions all things. So they say he gave birth to the deities, he made the towns, he established the gnomes, he placed the deities in their shrines, he settled their offerings, he established their shrines, he made their bodies according to their wishes, their natural forms, shrines in earth, but also, and planets, suns, moons, and stars, but also their shrines, their statues and so forth. He fashioned everything. Thus the deities entered into their bodies of every kind of wood, every kind of stone, every kind of clay, in every kind of thing that grows upon him. So when they fashion, you fashion a sculpture according to the direction of the divinity, and the spirit will take up residence in that sculpture, just like a spirit will possess us to communicate with the community. We set up a sculpture, a shrine, a statue, according to divine order, under the direction of Ptah, properly fashioned, then the spirit will take up residence during ritual to communicate directly with us. He fashioned the deities, their bodies, according to their wishes of divine order, and they entered their bodies of every kind of wood, every kind of stone, every kind of clay, and every kind of thing that grows upon him, in which they came to be, all the natural shrines on earth, rivers, caves, mountains, earth, black earth, red earth. He fashioned all these different forms, and the spirits took up residence in every aspect of creation. Thus all the deities and their Kas and Kayats, souls, were gathered to him, content and united with the Lord of the two lands, the master of the two lands, the master of Neb Tawi, the master of the two lands, upper and lower Kamit and so forth, master of balance. So that's the cosmology and so forth of Ptah, what he does, what he takes all things, he fashions the forms of all things according to the dictates of divine order. And when he fashions all forms, including within the heart and the tongue, What is Buddhism talking about? So this is the cosmology. You have to understand the cosmology. When Buddhism is talking about, the Buddha talks about, you know, what's in your heart and speaking truth and formulating proper thoughts and not being controlled by misguided desire or lust or all these different things. Ptah fashions what's in the heart, is spoken through the tongue, then he fashions all things, and the deities enter into those things. He's fashioning all properly structured things because he has the ears that receive the directives from Amen and Amenet. He hears that, as you saw on the stele with the ears behind his throne. He receives that. He's sitting on the throne in a meditative posture. The ears are behind him. He receives the direction. It's captured in the heart, spoken through the tongue, and then he fashions all things that are in harmony with order. And then the life that he fashions operates in harmony with order. He is the Neb Ankh, or the master of life. He's the Seishar, the sage, the learned one, or the skilled one. This is all cosmology dealing with the divinity. Obuade in Akan, Obaluae in Yoruba, Sapota in Vodun in the Ewe tradition. This is a deity that we invoke and communicate with. He possesses, communicates with people, heals, teaches us medicine and everything else. So all these fools talking about Buddhism and the Black Buddha, everything they've been talking about is pure stupidity, foolishness. So now let me see. I just want to make sure there was no want to make sure we didn't miss any questions. Okay. All right, so that is the information we wanted to address with regard to Ptah. So, and in fact, tonight is the last class for the KUKUU-TUNTUM class. So we appreciate everybody for taking this class. We're going to be posting this video up, as well as actually the video is saving right now, or should be finished for last week's class. So we're going to post both of them this week.
Ojofu?
Yes,
hello,
I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I had asked a question in the chat room. My question was, let me find it. Okay. What about universalism? What text did the whites and their offspring corrupted to create this?
Which one did you say?
I said universalism. Like, what texts in Kamit did they corrupted to create this false religion?
You mean as far as you mean universalism just in general?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just like a approach or a philosophy, so to speak, just universalism, meaning, you know, we should embrace all things and all that. That's on one hand, it's corrupting this information with regard to Ptah. So the Buddhists do that, but then the Christians do the same thing. They'll do the same thing with Heru, corrupting the information about Heru and making Jesus, making the fictional character Jesus first. And then this whole notion of turning the other cheek and all of that. They're blotting out, like when we read about, peace is given to those who live in harmony with order and death is given to the criminal. They'll just blot that kind of information out. Anything that has to do with, attacking the enemy, they'll just blot that out. But we don't have any texts talking about universal or unconditional love and things like that. So what they have to do is corrupt or either, blot out any reference to, vengeance, attacking, revenge against the enemy and so forth. Any reference to that, they'll just block it out. And then they'll corrupt the information that already exists. So if you're talking about Ptah, for example, and then you look at Buddha, you can see the things they left out, like the text we just read, the Mehet Cosmology, when it's talking about peace is given to the one who lives in harmony with order and death is given to the criminal. They won't even mention that. But when they're talking about Ptah fashions all forms and gives the bodies of all, creates the bodies and fashions the forms of all things and gives, the bodies for the divinities to take up residence in, and fashions the forms of plant life and animal life and mineral life and all these different things. They'll take that and say, oh, well, he's, the God, or he embraces all things. That means we need to embrace all things. But they cut out the portion talking about killing the criminal, death to the criminal, and leave the part about embracing all things. But this is dealing specifically with those who live in harmony with order. When they're talking about embracing, in fact, just to go back to that text itself, just so you can see the way they would do that. Okay, this is going back to that, the Meht for cosmology. Before it's talking about him giving birth to all the divinities, making all the towns, establishing all the nomes, placing all the deities in their shrines, settling all their offerings, establishing all their shrines, making their bodies according to their wishes, and every kind of thing that grows upon him and so forth, and all the deities being gathered to him. Before saying all that, it says justice is done to him who does what is loved, and punishment is to him who does what is hated. Life is given to the peaceful, and death is given to the criminal. Then it says, thus were made all labor, all crafts, the action of the arms, the motion of the legs, the movements of all the limbs, according to this word, which is devised by the heart and comes forth by the tongue and creates the performance of everything. They laid out the order of creation. Divine law, love, law and love is the same word. Divine law, love, and divine hate. They laid the foundational order of creation. The expansive pole of divine order is divine law, love. The contractive pole is divine hate. That's the balance of creation. After they laid that out, then they talked about how Ptah created all things, based on what's in the heart and spoken through the tongue. But what's in the heart and spoken through the tongue is rooted in the order that governs all creation, which is divine law, love, and divine hate. Embracing that which is harmonious and exterminating those who are out of harmony with order. Then they talk about all the things he's done for everything in creation, naturally created entities. When they're talking about embracing all and naturally created entities, and talking about he gave, he gathered all the souls were gathered to him. It says, thus all the deities and their cause, the souls were gathered to him. That's not talking about the whites and their offspring. That's talking about the divinities first and foremost. And when they talk about human beings, they're talking about Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, not the whites and their offspring who didn't even exist. But then it's also not talking about those who are criminal, because it just said that death is given to the criminal. So even those who are criminal in our own population, death is given to them. Only the ones who live in harmony with order, they're gathered together with Ptah. So they will leave those things out and make people believe that the deity is embracing all people and you shouldn't reject anybody and you should love all and so forth. And then they will stick themselves into it. So that's the kind of thing they do. They omit, and then they also corrupt. Okay.
Okay, thank you for answering my question.
Okay, yeah, I said it. No problem. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and end it here. So we're gonna, as I said, we're gonna post this up within the next day or two, and then we'll also have tonight. As a matter of fact, we'll send out last week's class, and then we'll post this one up when it's done. And then we have, so after tonight, we're finishing up the last two classes. We're the Hoodoo class, the Akanfo Nana Som course, which is the 4-week course. We've done 2 of those sessions already. This Feed-Out Friday is session 3, and next Friday is the final session. And then we have ritual celibacy and cyclical fasting for alignment. This week is the 4th week. Next week is the 5th week. And the week after next is the final class in that session as well. So if you want to get in on the Akanfo Nana Som, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion course, we're halfway through, but you can, that's on every Feed-Out Friday, this week and next week. You can still get in on that. So again, yet I'll say we thank everybody for tuning in, and Yabisharbio, we will meet again. That's it.